Yo, what up? How's it going? And welcome back. Today we're doing the first episode of Don't Blame the Jungler, which is going to be the podcast we're doing. I guess what we're doing. We're doing the podcast. Cool. This is a working title. I don't know if that's going to be the title we're going to end up with, but that's the title we're working with now. So, yeah, that's what we're working with. So, it's just going to be me talking. We're going to be talking. I have the topics up on the screen that you can see. We're talking about we're going to be talking about play-ins. Play-ins just finished just now. I think the actual last game is on right now, but it's essentially a troll game because it's exhibition match. And VEGA Squadron is kind of running a comp they haven't been doing and kind of playing all fast and loose. So I didn't really feel like watching it, so that's why we're not watching it. And they even put on their Twitter that they're like, "Hey, this last match is exhibition, so there's something flashy coming out." And they essentially just played all side laners, right? Their team comp was all side laners. They played like Vlad, Vlad bottom lane, and Irelia, and what was the other one? Play a Hecarim or something? Oh, Rise. And a Shen. So they're playing only for side lanes, and then a Kindred. So they have, I mean, they can do like team fight stuff too, but essentially kind of running a weird comp and playing kind of weird too. They're getting caught up a whole lot. So didn't really seem worth watching, and would kind of skew my view of them. So I didn't really want to watch the game because they already said on their Twitter that they were kind of trolling that game anyway. So anyways, so they're essentially either undefeated or they might lose that game. But yeah, we're going to be doing play-ins today. So we're going to be talking about Group A and Group B. We're not going to go really deep into like each team or anything like that because the play-ins are already over. The only teams anybody really cares about now is Fong Fu Buffalo and VEGA Squadron and how they're going to fare against Team Liquid and Flash Wolves. But I do want to give a little bit of talk about Fenerbahce and a couple of the other teams. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And the last topic of the day, we're going to talk about global meta. This is like a broad topic that I just want to talk about. Every episode that I do, I kind of want to talk about just kind of like a game, just a general topic that's going on in the scene or just something. So this isn't what the global meta is right now because that is lead to be, we don't really know what it is for sure. I think it's going to be close to what we're already seeing in the playoffs from the major regions. I think that's what it's going to be close to see. It's going to be interesting when Team Liquid plays and Flash Wolves play because they're actually scrimming the other teams, the other major teams, or I would assume they're scrimming, they're scrimming G2 and they're scrimming SKT and IG and stuff like that. So all those teams are scrimming each other, so that's how the meta will actually get established. But these play-in teams aren't really doing the actual meta. It needs to be seen if that's the actual meta because those teams aren't going to be scrimming. Team Liquid aren't going to be scrimming G2 or SKT or anything like that because it's not worth their time to scrim those teams. So play-ins is kind of weird because you don't really know what the meta is. But the topic we're going to talk about really for global meta is just kind of like what is global meta and does it exist and stuff like that because there's kind of like a notion that there's like a stigma around people saying global meta for whatever reason. I listen to a lot of League podcasts, and for whatever reason, there's like a stigma around. Some people seem to think that there's only regional metas, or I don't know. There's like two ways that people think about global meta, and I want to talk about it. So just give my input on it. So I want to talk about it. Essentially, some people think there's not a global meta at all, and you just play your own thing, and there you go. And then some people have a more measured opinion, which is like, hey, there's a global meta. There's an optimal way to play the game based off of how the game is balanced, and then there's ways to play against the optimal way to play the game, which is like the counter meta, which in turn will be the metas because it's countering the current meta. And then there's also, if you're not the best at doing that, there are some regional strategies that make sense that you can play versus specific matchups with specific teams that make a lot of sense. And if you're not good at the meta strategy, it makes sense to play your regional meta. That is the measured sense. But we're gonna talk a lot about that later. So I just kind of talked about it, but we're talking about more about that later. So, but anyways, cool. So let's just get right into it. So let's just talk about Group A. So Group A, teams for Group A, they were, that was the Fongvu Buffalo group. That we had Fongvu Buffalo, 1907 Fenerbahce, Bombers, and Isurus Gaming. So we're going to talk about Isurus Gaming and Bombers first. You know what? Before I do any of this stuff, before I talk about Group A, I just want to talk about play-ins teams in general real quick. Because I just want to talk about this because I think some people are real hot on Fongvu Buffalo right now. I think people should be hot on Vega Squadron a little bit. We'll talk about that when we get to Vega Squadron, or when we get to Group B. We'll talk more about that. But a lot of people are hot on Fongvu Buffalo. I don't necessarily think you should be. So let's talk about that. So I'm just going to give you my personal opinion on play-ins teams. So I'm always super hyped about play-ins in terms of, I'm one of those people who always believe in the underdogs, and like I'm waiting for play-ins and I'm like, dude, we're gonna get these play-ins, and I don't watch any of the minor regions like at all. I don't watch their finals or anything like that. I don't watch OPL. I'll maybe catch a game every now and then. It'll just be the only thing on Twitch or whatever. Be the only professional game on, and oh yeah, why not? I'll watch a Dire Wolves game, whatever. They were trash this season apparently. I looked up didn't win a game or something. But anyways, um, but but I don't watch any of their games, and I don't prep for them coming in. I kind of just listen to what everybody says, and I'm like, okay, yeah. And I kind of know which regions have been strong in the past. Vietnam. I know about the Gigabyte Marines. We're always good. I knew Levi and all that good stuff. So Gigabyte Marines have always been good. Turkey's always been good, and then Gambit has always been good. So those are the teams I expect to be good. The teams that come from the regions of the TCL, the CIS, and the VCS. So you always expect those to be the strong regions. So that makes sense there. But other than that, I don't have any expectations. So I'm always like, dude, what if the Bombers come out and they just play like super clean League of Legends? They're just the most clean macro League of Legends. Their players are just insane. They're like all like Faker. Like, I'm ready for that. I'm always ready for that. I don't discount play-in teams just because they're play-in teams. I never do that. I'm not. So keep that in mind whenever I'm about to say what I'm about to say. I'm like ready for a play-ins team to pop off. Play-ins teams looked like play-ins teams this year, for sure. Vega Squadron looked pretty good. I'll give you the caveat that Vega Squadron looked pretty good, and I'll just give a very general, and I'm generalizing here. I'm going to say a lot of general statements. But essentially, the way I can tell when a team is pretty good, even in like a major region, so like the lower tier teams look bad in major regions, but even in a major region like NA or LEC or LCK, like in a major region, when I can tell a team's good, is when their draft strategy makes sense. So the way they draft makes sense. So the way they're coordinating their picks and get power picks or get power duos. When you're doing regional plans, you're kind of just picking for comfort a lot of the time. So that I didn't take that into account a whole lot, other than the way they draft around picking their duos together, because duo picks are really powerful right now. But yeah, so the way you draft doesn't make sense, and then after you do your draft, you should have clearly identifiable win conditions. So like, does your draft win in team fights? Does your draft win the early game? Does your draft have a 1-3-1 setup? Does your draft have a 1-4 setup? So do you have those things? And then so you should know what you need to do to win. And then so since you have that established, then you need at the beginning of the game make a plan to make that happen. So if you have a 4-1 setup, like you have a Jace, and you have the rest of your comp is set up for disengage, like you have like a Gragas, you have like a Varus, you have like a Zoe, and a Morgana, something like that. you can set up to have your Jace just slam lane. So if you can set up to have your Jace slam lane with like your Gragas setting up to put him ahead, if your Jace is slamming lane, you can purely win through your Jace because you have so much poke and disengage with your Varus, Zoe, um, Gragas, and Morgana. You just have so much disengage if that's what you wanted. You can just set up your Jace to slam, and then you can have your Gragas hover if you want, or you can set up like a Nocturne Jace for the side lane control, something like that. And then like the enemy, yeah, so if you have that set up, then you can set up like that. But if the enemy drafted for really good side lane control, then you could just pull your Jace down, then you can adapt your plan to pull your Jace down, and you just set it for full siege, because now your win condition is really flexible. So that's a good drafting chart, because your win condition now is really flexible because you have the Varus, Zoe, Jace, so you can set it for a 4-1 slam comp, or if that doesn't work out, you can set it for a full siege with Zoe, Jace, and Varus. If the enemy team counters with picking like a Nocturne and also a good side laner, because a Nocturne in the side laner more often than not is going to win against your Jace if he overextends. So if you don't have good setup for that based off of what the Jace comp was. So essentially what I'm saying is, what I look for in a good team is, do they have a draft strategy that makes sense? Okay, check, you got that. And then once you have that set up, you identify the win conditions, and then you do things in the game that move towards that win condition. So you do those things. And then after that, you just continue applying to those win conditions. And then the smaller things are just individual things that players do. The individual things that players do are the much smaller things. So like the way that players manage their cooldowns, like their teleports, the way they manage waves, the way they manage cooldowns, like Zhonya's, like the way Vlad would play with like his Zhonya's and his ult combo, and escapes death. So smaller things like that would be the next layer to that. But the bigger picture is the bigger picture, and the easiest way to identify whether a team is playing correctly is just identifying win conditions, building around that, and then playing towards it. And everything in their game makes sense to that. So if you're playing on a side of the map, does the weak side of the map play correctly? And is that being communicated? Are you tracking the enemy jungler? Is that all being communicated correctly? And so I'll just say this. None of the play-in teams did that very well, except for VEGA Squadron. VEGA Squadron looked like a top 4 team in a major region. Granted, we're playing against really bad teams, in my opinion. The teams they were playing against were not very good. Detonation Focus Me was okay. They had a very Detonation Focus Me had a very linear playstyle, had a very one-dimensional playstyle. They picked for we're going to get 40 CS down in every single one of our lanes except for bot lane. We're going to get slammed and not do anything, and then we're gonna ARAM, and we're gonna ARAM and hope we win. And then they win because they're playing against other bad teams. But then they couldn't win against VEGA because VEGA wasn't a bad team. Essentially, is what happened. They played like Golden Guardians. It's kind of how they play. Golden Guardians at the beginning of the year. That's how Golden Guardians play. That's how bad teams play. Is they pick for scaling, and they just get slammed in lane, and then they just have a better team fighting comp than you, and they just like, yo, what up? What's 5v5? My 5v5 is better than yours. And we also spike at one item, or don't have item spikes at all because we're playing Sona Terek. So I was really hot on Japan. I wanted them to win just because I love Japanese fans. Like I'll show you some stuff from Japanese fans in a minute. They make me happy. I wanted Japan to win, but didn't happen. They weren't a good team, so feels bad. They did what bad teams do. Anyways, so that's what play-in teams look like this year, and that's how you identify good teams. Fongfu Buffalo. What I'll say about Fongfu Buffalo before we get into individual teams and talk about the individual groups, and 1907 Fenerbahce, is the things that I said that identifies a good team. They did all those things pretty well. They were not bad. So Fongfu Buffalo, 1907 Fenerbahce, and in VEGA Squadron seemed to cut above everybody else, but VEGA Squadron maybe a cut above them as well. But those three teams seem to be the best teams in the tournament so far, for sure. And everybody else seem to be very bad teams. Very not good teams. I'll say very bad teams. They're the champions of the regions, but if they were in a major region, they would get smoked. But those three teams seem to have very clear like play styles and ways they wanted to play the game, and kind of executed on them pretty well. Fongfu Buffalo have a lot of individual issues with some of their players. I won't necessarily just say some of their players. They just have some boneheaded mistakes that you see in the game sometimes. And they play team fights really well and have some really standout players like Meliodas plays really well. Null has some pretty good roams. In the Fenerbahce games were the games that I really paid attention to. I just rewatched them actually, but we'll talk more about them in a little bit. But they play towards their win condition pretty decently, but nothing too special. But anyways, that's my thing about playing teams. They're playing teams for a reason, based off of past success. But they definitely looked like playing teams. Although, whatchamacallit, Vegas Squadron looked pretty good. Okay, cool. So that's my thing about playing teams. All right, let's talk about Group A. So that's a group with Fongfu Buffalo, 1907 Fenerbahce, Bombers, and Isurus Gaming. So I already talked about. I said Fongfu Buffalo and Fenerbahce were kind of a cut above the other two teams in their group. So let's talk about Isurus Gaming and Bombers. I'm not going to talk about them very long at all. They were just not good. Let's talk about. I remember watching the Isurus games and was just like, oh yikes. Let's see what they drafted in the Fenerbahce game, the first game they played. Oh yeah, the Bugox guy. Oh yeah, they won the Fenerbahce game. Their first game, they won their first game against Fenerbahce, and then they lost a ton of games after that. That's what happened. I know Audi and Seiya. Seiya's a good player. Seiya's a really good player. Wait, that's not the first game, is it? When you look at these matches on Google, they like go out of order sometimes. They played Fongfu Buffalo first. Yeah, they played Fongfu Buffalo first because Fongfu Buffalo played the first game. They played Fenerbahce at the end of the day. Okay, this is in reverse order. Oh yeah, they started 0-2. I remember that. Seiya played pretty well. I remember Seiya playing really well in that Fenerbahce game on Aurelia. Seiya had a really good tournament, and I remember Seiya and Audi from I guess it may have been MSI 2 years ago. I don't remember what team they played for. Did they play for Rainbow Seven, or the team that Rainbow Seven used to be? What team did Rainbow Seven used to be? Rainbow Seven used to be what did Rainbow Seven used to be? Let me look it up. Is that the team they were on? What team did Rainbow Seven used to be? Is that the team they were on? I could be totally wrong. Yeah, that was the team they were on. What was that team called? Because it says Seiya and Audi on their roster. I don't remember what they used to be called. I don't remember, but yeah, they used to be on Rainbow Seven, so that's what I remember them from. They were on Rainbow Seven. That's where I remember them from. Okay, yeah, I remember them playing on that. I think Seiya had a really good tournament. He was Played really intelligently on Irelia in that last game against Fenerbahce that they played, so that was pretty good. And Audi played really well with that. Essentially, they were camping him all game, and he played really well around that, and they won against that Fenerbahce game. So I think they can be happy about that at least, but they're not happy with the result of the tournament, obviously. None of these teams are happy. People come in with this mindset. They're like, oh, play-in teams, they should be happy with their performance. Of like, and I just did that, right? But these teams want to win, so the players shouldn't be happy, I don't think. But I think fans can be happy sometimes if their teams play well and they have show a good performance and they try their best. I think fans should take it easy on these players a little bit. Sometimes they want the best, obviously, but they expect the best out of but they're playing teams, But these players want to break through and make their region the best, but and stuff. But cool, the Bombers. Bombers did not have a good tournament. Another jungler came in hot. He was the MVP of the league. Wasn't he the MVP of the league, the Balkan? Or he was a rookie of the league? Yeah, he was rookie of the league. I know FBI played really well. I think FBI had a really good showing. I think Ryoma had some really bad games and some really good games. This is a 9-1 game by Ryoma. I watched all these games, but it's so many games in a small portion of time. Oh yeah. Yeah, Ryoma had some decent games, and FBI was playing really well. It was like FBI was trying to get everybody's location all at once, It was putting his team on his back, but back wasn't big enough. Where's more Bombers games? 1, 2. Where are the other Bombers games? Oh, there they are. Game info isn't available. Yeah, FBI played really well. I think Ryoma had a pretty good tournament. I remember Balkan wasn't having a very good tournament. It was FBI and Rogue were having FBI. Their bot lane was playing pretty well. But other than that, pretty disappointing tournament. I think from the OPL, people were pretty hot on them coming in, but pretty disappointing tournament from them overall. I think FBI had a pretty good tournament, pretty good showing, and they can be happy with his performance for sure. But overall, should be sad about that. Okay, 1907 for Nabache and Fangvu Buffalo. Okay, so let's talk about. Essentially, we're just going to talk about 1907 for Nabache and Fangvu Buffalo at the same time, and then we'll talk a little bit about Fangvu Buffalo now, and then we're going to talk about them a lot more in the matchup between PVB and TL, because that's really what everybody wants to talk about, and that's really what I want to talk about as well. Let's talk about 1907 Fenerbahce. They had a pretty good tournament. They're a really one-dimensional team. In the sense of they play very heavily through their jungler. They play very heavily through Kyrie. Like super heavily through Kyrie. In combination with the solo laners, which is not a bad way to play League of Legends. And essentially only plays 3 champions. He did play Elise, and they lost that game. That was the game they lost to Isurus. But all the other games of the tournament, I believe he played only Kindred and Talia, right? And then he had a Nocturne game, right? It was Kindred, Talia, Nocturne, and then that one Elise game. And he lost all the games that weren't on Kindred or Talia. Yeah, so they played purely through Kyrie and the solo laners. And then and Ruin did not have the best tournament, I don't think. Bolulu had a pretty okay tournament. But Kyrie had some pretty interesting pathing, and they did some cheese stuff in the tournament because that's what you do in best of ones. It's actually not a bad strategy. It's not a knock on them for doing cheese things, like the Nocturne level 2 gank with red buff in their final game. That's not a bad thing to do. They ended up losing on Kyrie engaging, which is unfortunate. They kind of gifted the game away. It very, very well could have been Fenerbahce in this final match or in the series with Team Liquid. They play out the early games pretty well. Ruin loses a lot of 1v1s, so that doesn't work out well for them. So Ruin lose out on a lot of 1v1s, and they play purely through Kyrie. So anywhere where Kyrie is on the map is where good things are happening a lot of the times. But Ruin loses a lot of 1v1s, and then the synergy between Kyrie and Bolulu is mainly the way their early game kind of goes. And then loses out. They lost out on the late game versus Fongvu Buffalo. Fongvu Buffalo is a very good team fighting team. They're actually really good at executing team fights. Based off of the 2 games I watched with Fenerbahce, the way they execute team fights, the way they manage their cooldowns, and use their abilities essentially, and set up the fights are pretty decent. Mainly the way they use their abilities are pretty decent, like their abilities to use their champions correctly. And that sounds kind of weird that I'm saying that because they're professional players, but you'd be surprised some of the teams in the tournament the way they use their cooldowns. So, but anyways, Fenerbahce plays heavily through their jungler, and if that's not working out, and if they don't kind of snowball the early game, then they have a tough time. So that's kind of what happened to them in this tournament. They have a tough time executing in the late game. Boo! That is 927 Fenerbahce. Very well could have been them, and very well could have been them in the series against TL, but it's not going to be because of the fumble around the Baron. Kyrie kind of entered in, went for the Bobby Big play, and actually ended up inting in the 5 people, and they lost the game instantly. It's hard to tell if they were going to win that game though. Very close match. All right, let's talk about Fongvu Buffalo. So I'm going to talk about Fongvu Buffalo a little bit right now. But I'm mainly going to talk about them when I talk about them versus Team Liquid, because I think that's a better context than talk about Fongvu Buffalo. So Fongvu Buffalo. Let's talk about those guys. All right, Fongvu Buffalo. So Fongvu Buffalo, they really like to set up team fighting comps. And they also like to set up a strong side lanes as well. Those are the 2 things I noticed whenever they play against the games that really mattered in this tournament for them were the games they played against Fenerbahce. Honestly, were the games that mattered a lot. What's really telling is the game that they had to win the tiebreaker match, they set up the comp that I described earlier. They set up that wasn't the exact comp I described earlier, but they set up a 4-1 disengage comp. Or a siege team fighting comp is what they said. Those are the 2 options that they could go. So they set up a 4-1 with a split with a side laner with the Jace, with a disengage Morgana, Gragas, Lissandra, Varus as their other people that they set up in the game in the must-win game. So that tells me that's probably their most optimal strategy is set up for a 4-1 disengage comp. That's what they wanted to do. But that was also they also drafted a Gragas as like a denial for Kindred, I believe, whenever they were drafting that initially. Actually, I think they ended up just flat banning that out. Yeah, they just flat banned that out. So that tells me that's what they like to play because that's what they played in their other game against Fenerbahce. Let's see what they put against their other game of Fenerbahce. Wait a second. Wait a tick. Yeah, that is their tiebreaker game. Yep. And then their other game that they played that same day, they set up for they set up for a 1-3-1 or 4-1 or a team fight. They had actually a pretty good setup. So they had an Irelia for side lane control. So they can do 4-1 if they want to, and they have Ezreal Tom Kench who gets instant priority. And they can also do 1-3-1 if they want to. because they can they also have a LeBlanc in their comp, so they can put a LeBlanc in the side lane. The only issue with that setup is that their jungler is Kindred. So Kindred can do decent with the 3, but she can't do decent with the 1s on the sides because she can't roam over, and the enemy jungler was a Talia. So they could go for 1-3-1 if they want to, but probably not. This is a really decent team fighting comp, so they probably want to team fight with this comp. So they ended up losing that game. This was kind of a weird comp, with the Kindred added in there. Probably would have been better to have something like a Nocturne or something like that. Something if they want to just go pure for the 1-3-1. Ezreal's like the best 1-3-1 ADC. Okay. So that tells me that's what they like to do, right? They like to set up for side lane control. They like to set up for side lane control and team fighting, right? So they essentially want to get their side lanes ahead, or their solo lanes. I keep saying side lanes, but I really mean their top laner. They really want to get their top laner ahead. So they really want to get their top laner ahead, and then get it to the mid game, and then play for side lane control, and then execute well in the team fights. That's really what they do well. And that's what they try to do in all the games that they were playing, especially in the games that they had to win. That's what they set up. They set up for a disengaged side lane control. Didn't necessarily work out that way in the game. I think Zeros is definitely the player to do it. I think Meliodas is definitely the player to set it up. But we'll talk more about that whenever we get to the TL stuff. Cool. That was Group A. All right. Cool. We're gonna talk about these topics a little bit out of order. Let's talk about PVV versus TL, since we just talked about PVV versus TL. So let's talk about that, and then we'll double back and talk about Group B, so we can talk about Flash Wolves and Vega. Cool. So let's talk about the matchup PVV versus TL. So I'm going to talk about PVV real quick, and then I'll talk about TL, and then I'll talk about the matchup. Okay. So let's talk about PVV. So I talked about them a little bit just now, and what they like to do. So they like to set up for side lane control with their top laner, and then they like to they can play pretty decently proactive in the early game with Null. Null actually had that was Sandra game. He went top lane, he TP'd top lane, went back mid lane, shoved mid lane in, and then roamed bottom lane. So they can set up early proactive games, early proactive things in their early game. They can do that, but they mainly play for you get their side laner ahead, so they get their top laner ahead. I keep saying side laner because their top laner picks to be a side laner a lot of the time, and then they pick for teamfight comps. Other than that, so if they don't do that, they pick for teamfight comps. Is usually what they do, and then they play to execute well in the mid and late game. Is what they play for. They really play for the mid and late game. So that's what they play for. All right, so let's talk about what Team Liquid plays for. So anybody who's watching this probably knows what Team Liquid is. So Team Liquid is obviously, everybody knows that they're I'm going to say this, but then I'm going to explain further because I don't want to just be one of those people that they're a bot-oriented team, and they are. They're not a team that like TP's bot at 5 minutes like Fnatic is though. They're a bot-oriented team as in like they want to get to the team fight stage and they're going to have an AD carry that's going to carry the game. That's the way that they're a bot-oriented team. But it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have people flying into the bot lane like when you watch a Fnatic game and you see Bwipo TP bot lane at 7 minutes of the game. I think they since stopped doing that, but I watched some Fnatic games this year and it was pretty nutty. I think they still do that a little bit, but that's not really necessarily TL's playstyle. But they are a bot-oriented team in the sense of they want to get to the mid game, and they want to get to the mid game and utilize the power of their AD carry to win the game, because he will win the game by carrying the game through his ability to play the AD carry position. And then they set up their team around that in the mid game. But it doesn't necessarily mean their early game is predicated around that win condition, or they don't have to manage their players to do that. And the reason why they don't have to do that is because their bot lane is good enough to not need that, because they get advantages on their own, or don't get disadvantaged, if that makes sense. So let's talk about this real quick. So TL is mainly a team. Everybody knows their top laner. Everybody knows Impact. Um, Impact is a tank or control player. The key thing here is he can play side laners. It's not that he can't play side laners. It's just he doesn't play people who slam people in lane. Or he can, but it's just not the optimal way for him to play. So if his champion requires... Azael talks a lot about this, so I'm kind of piggybacking up on what he talks about, but it's a really good point. The optimal way to utilize Impact skills isn't to put him on somebody who slams people in lane. So someone like Jace isn't something that's optimal to put him on. Someone like, if you go for a really aggressive, Kennen matchup, or a really aggressive, Kennen could work because he works as a pseudo frontliner. That could be fine. But someone like Jace. The Jace is just the best example I can think of right now. So, a champion that has to slam in a matchup, in the side lane, and has to get their own advantages, isn't necessarily the best way to utilize Impact strengths. Is a really good way to put that. And on the highest level of play, if you put him in matchups where he has to slam his opponent, and the opponent also wants to slam you, that's not beneficial for their team. So if you put him in a carry versus carry where both of them need to slam each other, and that's where the team is going to be going around, that's not a beneficial play style to Team Liquid. So they probably won't play that play style. That doesn't mean that he can't play carries. Champions that don't need to slam lane, champions like Kennen. So I just said Kennen, but Kennen doesn't need to slam lane. Kennen bullies in lane, but he doesn't need to slam lane because he works as a frontliner, and doesn't need to work as a side laner. So like a champion like that is a carry champion. A champion like Gangplank is a carry champion, but essentially doesn't slam anybody in lane. Just sits there and farms up and gets their items and ults bottom lane. That's a very good carry champion for Impact. So other than that, does great on frontline champions. So everybody knows what Impact does. That's Impact, I'm not going to go down the whole roster, but I just wanted to explain that point because a lot of people are just like, oh, Impact's going to get slammed by people. Impact doesn't get slammed by people. He does sometimes, right? He does. He gets outmatched sometimes, but, that's that. Cool, but the general play style of TL is they play a very controlling style. They limit mistakes. They also limit opportunities of enemies. It's not like they just play to themselves. They limit opportunities of enemies, and then they look for opportunities through that. They don't just look for mistakes of enemies, play that super Korean style. They also make plays with Xmithie. So Xmithie will look for plays. And what's cool is they play a lot through Xmithie and Core JJ for the whole large portion of the early game. And then they play a lot through Core JJ and double in the late game. I haven't said Jensen's name. And I'll talk about Jensen in a minute. But they play a lot through. In the early game through Xmithie and Core JJ. They're very cerebral players. They're just super smart players. And the way Team Liquid gets to that mid game isn't just by like accidentally getting there, but just like, oh, we're gonna hold on. Like when you watch a team like Detonation Focus Me, where they're just holding on. They're like, okay, we're gonna get down some CS, but we're gonna get to this mid game. We're gonna fight you. They make proactive defensive plays. So they like set up vision correctly, and then they look into the enemy's jungle, or they look for plays. They track the enemy jungler well, and then they look for plays where it makes sense for them to look for plays. They don't just like look for super high risk plays because like, yo, if we get this, we're gonna slam them. It's more of like, hey, we know we're gonna win at mid game, so let's just. It's not like let's just get the mid game. It's more of a nuanced approach. It's kind of like it's not really just like, yo, let's just get the mid lane, so let's just keep it chill. It's more of like, um, hey, we're gonna get to mid game, so we're gonna make we know that's gonna happen because we're that good and we know it's gonna happen, and we're gonna get the mid game either at even or with an advantage because we're better than them. And at the same time, we're also going to be tracking all their players, and when they make a mistake, we're going to pounce and destroy them too. So we're going to get a big advantage. So I just made them sound really awesome, but essentially that's what they do. The way Smithy and Core JJ work together. So they set up plays by like, oh, there are enemy junglers on the top side of the map. Oh, we can dive for sure, and this is going to get us a huge advantage. But they're not just going to do that recklessly. They're not just going to be like, I don't know where the enemy jungler is, but this is a good time to dive. Let's do this. They're just a little bit more measured, smart about it. It seems. So a lot of people think they're really lackadaisical, just kind of fall into their weeds. But they get individual leads, around their bottom lane, and Jensen gets individual leads as well. Um, they get their individual leads, um, but and they don't just fall into leads. They get their own individual leads by just being better players a lot of the times. But then also by recognizing how the enemy is moving, they'll make their own aggressive plays. And it's like an aggressive defensive play because they're making it based off of the knowledge that they have in the game, which is a kind of a Korean way of playing the game, I would say. But anyways, cool. So the PVB versus TL. Who's going to win that matchup? PVB has given me no reason to think that they're going to beat TL. And the people that think TL should be sweating, I don't see it. I think TL might drop games. It's a best of 5. If they might drop a game because it's being cold going into a tournament, happens. It could go the distance, but if it does, it would be purely for that reason. In my opinion, I could just be dead wrong, but and they could just lose. But if when I say I could just be dead wrong, and that's kind of like a cop out, I'm gonna say this: if they lose, it would be purely off of like 100% would just be purely off of choking. Like it would have to just be purely off of choking. Team Liquid is definitively a better team than Fangbu Buffalo. I'm gonna say that right now. Definitively a better team than Fangbu Buffalo. 100%. The way Fangbu Buffalo plays, it's not a good matchup for them. They play through mid-game team fighting and side lane control. Team Liquid plays through mid-game team fighting. And the way they set up Fangbu Buffalo doesn't set up fights like Team Liquid does. Team Liquid sets up fights way better. Team Liquid sets up fights like an elite team. I did not see that from Fangbu Buffalo. The way Core JJ sets up fights, the way he sets up flanks, everybody knows his Alistair play and stuff like that. Alistair's not a super meta champion anymore, but everybody knows that. So the way they set up fights, the way they set up objective control, is far superior than Fangbu Buffalo's, at least what I saw displayed in this tournament. And I just don't see them slamming in the side lane. I don't see Zeros slamming Impact in the side lane. Zeros was not impressive to me, and I don't think they'll be able to slam in the top lane without just getting significant disadvantages on the other side of the map. Just the way that Xmithy and Core JJ will coordinate, like tracking the enemy jungler. Like if that's the way they want to play, like hey, we're just gonna slam it. Because if I was Fangbu Buffalo, that's what I would do. I'd be like, okay, our way in is just to slam Impact. I would see that as my way in. All right, let's slam in the side lane and try to just split push to victory. That's kind of the way to be Team Liquid. That's what I would do. So it'd probably be kind of easy to prep for Fangbu Buffalo if I was Team Liquid. So I just don't see it. I don't see it at all. I don't see them getting slammed in the side lane. And if they did, I would just see Team Liquid getting advantages everywhere else on the map. So based off of having that information already up front. So I just don't see it happening. If they lost, it'd be pure choke. So Team Liquid, heavy favorites. Heavy favorites. IMO. Heavy favorites. Cool. Alrighty. Well, that's that matchup. Alright. Oh, sorry, I was reading a tweet. Just started using Twitter. That's that's what all the young folk use. You know what I'm saying? And all the old folk. All right, let's talk about Group B. Let's talk about Group B. Alrighty. So let's talk about Group B. So we have INTZ Esports and Mega Esports, Detonation Focus Me, and Vega Squadron. Cool. So I talked about this group a little bit. So Vega Squadron was a cut above all of these teams. Detonation Focus Me ended up going 4-2 in the group actually, and then the other teams only won one game. Or let me see. Did Vega end up dropping that last game? Let's see. Yeah, Vega did drop the last game. They were trolling that game. So Mega did win 2 games. But that last one was kind of fraudulent, honestly. Vega was essentially trolling the last game. So, but Detonation Focus Me did win 4 games, but Vega was the clearly best team in that group. Actually played really good League of Legends. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about we'll talk about INTZ first. So let's talk about INTZ. INTZ, they seemed like they played very nervous. There were individual plays by players that I was just kind of like, wow, I wouldn't do that. And I don't even play League that much. Like I was just like, wow, I would not do that. Like just Zanyazing at the incorrect time. Like mismanaging playing a Vladimir. That's like you ult and then you, like if you're about to die, you ult and then you Zanyas, but he like ulted and pulled rather than Zanyas. I believe that was INTZ that was doing that, and I was like, I would not do that. And a lot of nervous plays. And then when you watch like the last 2 games they had in the tournament, it seemed like they were playing a lot better. So a lot of nervous plays by them. Let's see some of their matches. But it was pretty not good. Yeah, Sheeny was having some bad plays in this tournament. And Sheeny was coming in as like the hyped player. I think it was like an MVP of the league or something. But he wasn't the MVP of the league because they like barely won. Flamingo was the best team in their week. Sheeny played really, really poorly. Yeah, Sheeny was playing really bad this tournament. Oh yeah, he canceled 2 autos on a dive. That was really depressing to watch. Yeah, so it looked like some really nervous plays and just really, really poor playing. I'll read you some. The reason why I have Twitter open right now is because I'll read you some comments on like, because LoL Esports will retweet like things from teams, and it's so when you like, so INTZ is a Brazilian team, right? And then Detonation Focus Me is a Japanese team. They both got eliminated. So the INTZ team had a post. It was like, hey, come watch our last game. We got eliminated, but it sucks, but we tried our best. And then all the comments on it are just pure hate. They're like, thank you for our fans for supporting us. And then like, the first comment is, we count on all Brazilian. I'm translating these too. It's in Portuguese, right? It says, we count on all Brazilian fans. Okay, is that a joke? See, spent shame. Sometimes this doesn't translate correctly. Let's see. What's this other one? Brazilian fans are ashamed of the VCS trash. Like, what's going on? Like that, yeah, because they lost, right? Dude, and that's totally how NA fans would react too, right? But then all right. So here's one from one of the players on Detonation Focus Me. He had a tweet. It says, "Detonation Focus Me MSI ended with 4 wins and 2 losses. Thank you very much for your support." So they lost. They got eliminated. They did much better than the Brazilian team though. And it says, this person says, "GG, well played. You were so tired." I mean, this is translating from Japanese. You were so tired. Regrettable. Vega were strong. I also support Summer. I said, from the time he was free win ticket, he defeated Pool 2 Brazil and defeated Pool 1 Southeast Asia. DFM is too terrible growth at a visible level. I was tired for the moment. Okay, that may have been... No, wait, that may have been a negative ticket? A negative comment? I don't know. Hard to tell. Cheers, dude. It's translating from Japanese. I think the coaches were very difficult to schedule. I am glad that I can feel frustration that I could expect more from now on because there is a temperature difference after returning home. Please be careful. Oh, this person's just worried about this guy's health. Come on. What's going on? Thank you for your hard work. Thank you very much. There are a lot of opinions on picking bands, but I think there was something that only those people could feel when they were judging the next one. Okay? Thank you for your hard work. I'm really disappointed that it just came to the point where I can reach one step further, but I believe that this study will take advantage, or this team will take advantage of summer. GG, well played. Thank you for your good work. Thank you for your hard work. I'm expecting it in summer. Thank you for your hard work. Quick, this is so... Cheers. Cheers, dude. It's regrettable, unfortunately, but please do your best in the future in summer. Cheers, dude. I was able to watch it happily. Like, these people are just like, you did it! You tried your best! And you made us proud! You made us proud for Japan! And then these Brazilians are like, fuck you. Man. Pretty sad. Pretty sad. Pretty sad for the Brazilians. I was talking about MEGA. That's a Southeast Asian team. They were just not good. I'm not going to talk about them a whole lot, but they were just not good. Didn't do anything necessarily great. G4 played okay. G4 played pretty decently in the tournament. I'll be honest, I didn't watch a whole lot of their games after they got eliminated. I only watched the Detonation Focus Me and Vega game. Yeah, that's the last game I watched. And then I didn't pay much attention after that. After I knew they were getting eliminated, I just kind of stopped watching. I'll just be 100% honest. But I know G4 played pretty well in the tournament. But that's all I'm going to say about MEGA. I think we're just going to move on because this is taking a little bit of time. Cool. I was talking about Detonation Focus Me. So I have some opinions of Detonation Focus Me. I wanted Japan to win, dude. I wanted them to win so bad. The reason why I wanted them to win so bad is not because I'm wearing like a Dragon Ball shirt and I'm just like, Japan things, dude, they have like the best fan base, as I just described, and they have like the most scuffed. No, like Southeast Asia actually has like the most scuffed esports thing, but like they seem like such like a band of people together that are just like, I don't like League esports is so small there comparatively to like other esports. Mobile gaming is really big there, and so like the people who get really invested in the Japanese like esports or Japanese League esports is like super into it, and they're like, we must succeed, we must do this. And so I just want them to do it. And like there's a video of I saw this video of last year when Detonation Focused Me. They did really well at play-ins last year at Worlds. They made it to the knockout stage in play-ins, and they lost. But like they lost, and the casters were crying. I think they were crying whenever they qualified for knockouts or something like that. The casters were crying because they were so bad because it meant so much to them. And I was like, holy shit, dude, that's crazy. Like I'm like, dude, that's crazy. Like, fuck, that's nuts. Like they're so passionate about this. So I was like, man. And they're just like, and then when they lose, their fans are like, it's okay. It's okay. You showed them what we got, and we're gonna just come back and we're gonna be better. We showed them what we had, but it wasn't enough, and that's okay. We're gonna do better next time because they clearly weren't very good. But they played to their style though. I'll give it to them. They were just like, Detonation Focused Me was like, hey man, we only went in, we just got to set up scaling and find them with scaling. which is I talked really negatively about it earlier because it's essentially I really don't like it, especially like when I'm watching like major regions when teams are dropping games. Because essentially at the beginning of the year, I was one of those people who was like, "Yo, TSM's not bad." At the beginning of the year, whenever TSM was like 1-4 or whatever like that, I was like, "Yo, hold on, TSM's not bad." And all the other teams had like 4 wins. I was like, all these other teams aren't. They're playing terrible League of Legends. I was like, they're just scaling. They're just picking scaling lanes and then just not doing anything and getting to the mid game and and then they have better team fight comps. That's like all they're doing. And then TSM's the one actually playing League of Legends. It's just not working out for them. And then in a couple weeks, it's going to work out for them. And that's what happened. Um, those other teams that weren't playing League of Legends any way correct. You can't just pick for scaling and then not do anything. Like it's like teams like Team Liquid pick for team fighting, but they do stuff. Like they're proactive about it. They play the game smart. But like bad teams just if they know they're outclassed, and they don't know what to do, the best thing to do is, all right, let me pick Kale, let me pick Vlad, let me pick this. If I get 2 items, I win. If I get 4 items, I win. So if you don't know what to do either, if you don't know how to stop that, you're just betting on the enemy not knowing how to stop that. But if the enemy knows how to stop that, you'll lose every time. And at the beginning of the year, a lot of teams aren't coordinated enough to stop that, so you'll win a lot of games that way. So Detonation Focus Me, that's essentially what they're doing because they were outclassed at this tournament by Vega. So they were just like, all right, but we can beat these other two teams just by scaling, and then maybe we just beat Vega. Maybe they just aren't able to do it, and we just beat them with Sonateric. So I applaud them for doing it. And then next year maybe they'll come back and they've evolved and they actually can have multiple styles, stuff like that. So hyped on them next year, or hyped on them at Worlds. So I'm ready for Detonation Focus Me to come back. I'm ready for Japan to qualify for group stage. It'd be crazy. If they beat the LMS and get the group stage, beat Vietnam and stuff. It'd be crazy. Cool. So that's all I'm going to talk about Detonation Focus Me. So let's talk about Vega Squadron. Vega Squadron was the best team for sure. They were the best team for sure in play-ins. They did drop one game, but that one game is kind of fraudulent. They were just kind of trolling the last game. They even said on their Twitter, they're like, "Yo, we've already qualified, so whatever." And they drafted a Vlad bottom, and the game I watched parts of it. I didn't watch the whole game because I started filming this. Once I knew that they were kind of trolling that game, I just kind of stopped watching it because I didn't want it to, again, influence my view of them or whatever. They were just kind of playing really loose and whatever. And they even said on the show that, "Yo, this is an exhibition game. We're gonna play fun." So, they kind of have that mindset. So, but Vega, as I described when I was talking about earlier, how I can tell when a team is a good team is, do they play the draft correctly? So they play the draft intelligently. So that they draft around a win condition, and do they draft against the enemy's win condition? Check, they do that. And then do they play towards those win conditions of the game? Check, do they do that? And then the smaller things, do their players limit the mistakes and play their champions correctly? And do they play their champions to the limits of their champions? Check, they do that. So and then did they have a really good individual performance? Check, they do that. The Gadget had a really good tournament. Gadget was playing really, really, really well this tournament. His Heimerdinger play was good. His what was the other one he had that was really good? His Varus play was pretty good. People were kind of like, "Oh, they died in the Sonateric lane," but I mean, there were a lot of circumstances around that. I'd have to watch the game again and watch the exact setup for that play whenever they died. Oh, his Nico play was really, really solid. Yeah, and they bring a really special flavor because they play a lot of unique picks that make sense. That makes sense for what they're trying to do. So they set up strategies, and then they play purely to that strategy. So as I said, and when you're doing draft strategies, they set up a draft strategy, and they'll set up a draft strategy, and then they'll play to that win that has a really clear win condition. So like Pike Karthus, so they want to execute you, right? And they'll play towards getting that lane ahead. And I forget the rest of the draft they have set up with that, but they have like a really cool setup, and then they play towards those win conditions and actually execute the fights and utilize their cooldowns correctly. So they actually do those things correctly. And then the basic fundamentals, like the way you move around the map, the way they set up minion management, the way they set up objective control, actually looks like an elite team. Um, those are the fundamentals of the game, and those don't matter who you're playing against. So that's what was really impressive about them. That you could just say they're playing against bad teams, but the actual fundamentals of the game looked pretty well. And there weren't a lot of moments when you were watching them and you're just like, oh, what the fuck are they doing? There weren't a lot of moments when you watched that and you were thinking that. I can't remember a specific moment, but all the other teams I mentioned, I was like, oh, what the fuck are you doing? A lot of the times. But Vega looks pretty good. So we'll talk about the matchup with Flash Wolves. So I'm just going to be 100% honest, and I'm just going to say that I haven't watched any Flash Wolves games or prepped at all, and I'm going purely off. I'm being very transparent right here. I'd be lying if I said, yeah, I watched like 20 Flash Wolves games before this, and I watched like 20 Flash Wolves games, and I watched their finals and stuff like that. I didn't do that. I'm going purely off of what other analysts have said, because they had the time to do that. I've listened to all the week podcasts and stuff like that, so I'm going purely off of what they said about them. So I know they had a rocky road through spring getting to the finals. So I know they've had a rocky road getting to the finals and didn't even look like the strongest team in the LMS. And I know why everybody's really down on Flash Wolves. The reason why everybody's really down on Flash Wolves, if you're just unknowing why people are down on Flash Wolves when everybody was so high on Flash Wolves before. I mean, people were even down on Flash Wolves last year, and they won group stage. They were first place out of group stage last year. Is because they lost Carso last year. So they lost Carso last year, and then they lost Carso last year. So Carso went to RNG, right? And then in the off season of this year, they lost Maple, which is their mid laner, and they lost Sword Art, which is their supports, and they went to China to play. So they don't even have any other legacy players. They have Betty, and Hanabi is their only legacy players they have left now. So Betty and Hanabi are the only legacy players they have left now. So that's why people are really down on the LMS, and they didn't even look like the strongest team in their region for a lot of the time. And historically, Flash Wolves are just like 20-0 in their region, just smacking everybody, and then just blow through playoffs. But this year, it didn't even look like they were the strongest team in their own region. That doesn't even look good. Their region has never looked good. It's always only been Flash Wolves, and they didn't even look like the strongest team most of the year. So, I don't even know their play style anymore. Last year at Worlds and MSI and stuff like that, they played a lot of control mids. I remember them doing that, but that was with Maple, so it's hard to tell what they'll do. I know they played a lot of Scion mid and stuff like that. Scion mid is since way gone. And Betty and Hanabi are decent players. So Vega Squadron seems pretty good. And if there was ever a time for a team to beat a major region team, I think it'd be Vega Squadron to beat Flash Wolves. With that all being said, I don't feel confident enough to just say, nope, Vega Squadron's going to win. Because Vega Squadron, the only thing I've seen of Vega Squadron is them mopping up, their group was really bad. Detonation Focus Me was leagues better than the other two teams. The Detonation Focus Me was like worse than Golden Guardians at the beginning of spring. So that tells you anything. So, yeah. I'm still going to give it's pretty toss up, but since Flash Wolves are the incumbents, they're the major region team, we'll give it to them. We'll give them the prediction. We'll give them the 3-2. So let's give it to Flash Wolves. So we'll give them the Flash Wolves. This is a very weak prediction because I'm seriously unknowledgeable on both of the teams, and I'm sure everybody is as well. The only thing we've seen of VEGA is this tournament, and VEGA looks really strong in terms of the fundamentals of the game and have some unique picks, but Flash Wolves could also look the same. I haven't seen Flash Wolves since Worlds. I haven't seen them in a long time. So who knows? Who knows, brother? So it's really hard to tell. They could just be really good, or they could just be terrible. It's really hard to tell. But if there was ever a time for a minor region to win, it would be right now. My prediction that's going to happen is Team Liquid's going to win. Hot take, Vega Squadron's going to win. And then Flash Wolves is going to be... no, okay. All right, no, that's too hot. All right, Team Liquid's going to win, Flash Wolves are going to win, and then Vega Squadron's going to win. Those are going to be the teams that qualify. Imagine if Team Liquid, Vega Squadron, and Fengvu Buffalo qualify. That'd be insane. That'd be crazy. It'd be more crazy if Team Liquid didn't qualify, but there's no way they don't. They're definitely the strongest team. Definitely the strongest team. They're the fourth best team in the tournament for sure. Cool. So that's it with the topics for MSI, right? And then we'll have, yeah, that's it with the topics for MSI. All right, let's talk about global meta. So this is just a general topic. So this is just a general topic, and I wanted to talk about it today. So let's talk about it. So this is just a, yeah. So I've just heard this tossed around a little bit. People will talk about global meta, and if anybody doesn't know what, you should know what meta means. Everybody knows what meta. If you're watching this, you know what meta is. But some people stigmatize when people say global meta, and they'll say global meta doesn't exist. And I think they mean that. I think there's two types of way people mean that. So one way that people can mean this is this is the way that this is the way that I contest heavily. Is when you just say there's no global meta. You find the best way that works for you, and that's the best way to play the game. Always. And then that's the regional meta. And then regional meta is all that matters. And global meta doesn't exist. That can't be true. That can't be true at all. Because then when you go to a tournament, how come one meta kind of evolves, right? When you go to Worlds meta, remember Worlds last year, you come and everybody has their own little regional metas a little bit. But kind of not really. And I'll talk about it a little bit, but everybody comes together, and then now everybody's playing Aatrox Urgot at the beginning of the tournament. And then everybody's playing Akali Aurelia Lysandra at the end of the tournament. Everybody is. Why is that? Why that could because that's the best way to play the game, maybe? Maybe because that's the best way to play the game. Powerful flex laners is the best way to play the game. And maybe that was the best way to play the game for the whole past 2 months, and it was just kind of discovered by playing, and there was no more optimal way to play the game because the 2 months after that was still the best way to play the game until there were changes made to those champions. So that would be the global meta because that was figured out to be the most optimal way to play the game. So what I think people mean by that is they mean like there's no global meta because they're saying like because in regional play, this is how I've heard some people explain meta this way, and it frustrates me because this is not correct. But it's like correct a little bit, but it's also not correct. Because what they say is like the best team in your region decides the meta. So they're like, if G2 plays this way, then all the other teams want to play this way, or they want to find counter strategies to that way to play. It's kind of true, but it's kind of not true. Or like Team Liquid plays this way, so all the other teams want to play this way. They want to. Well, that's not true at all. TSM doesn't play that way. Cloud9 doesn't play that. Cloud9 doesn't play that way. That's how that is. Like, so I'm gonna break down that point. So a lot of people will say that. So like the best team in the region. So let's say Team Liquid was the best team in NA for most of the year. Or I'll just say the whole year. There were times where TSM looked like the best team or Cloud9 looked like the best team, but Team Liquid, was the best team of the year for sure. They didn't define the meta. Nobody was playing like Team Liquid. Maybe Golden Guardians was. But nobody was playing like Team Liquid. Team Liquid was playing a very Korean style League of Legends. A controlling team fighting style of League of Legends because that's the best way for them to play the game. But TSM wasn't playing that style. Cloud9 wasn't playing that style. FlyQuest wasn't playing that style. FlyQuest was playing for side lanes and was playing for team. They're playing for like TP flanks, stuff like that. So that's not necessarily true. And like regional meta can be a thing, but global meta is a thing. Global meta for sure is a thing. And the reason why global meta is a thing is because there's an optimal way to play the game because you're all playing the same game. Everybody in the world's playing the same game. So if the best way to play the game is flex solo laners, then that's the best way to play the game. And if that's the best way to play the game, the reason why that's the best way to play the game because that's how the game is balanced. Because like Irelia and Akali is not balanced. Like Irelia, Akali, Aatrox, Urgot, Lissandra are all flex laners, right? And at one time they were all so overpowered, right? So if you weren't able to play that style, you could not be the best team in the world. If you could not play that style, you could not be the best team in the world. Facts. You couldn't. You couldn't be the best team in the world because the game was balanced in the way that the best team in the world would be the team that could play that style. Facts. So that would be a global meta. Every team in the world would want to try to play that. And it's not because the best team was doing that. Maybe a team started doing that and then the best teams started doing that as well and then people recognized it, but it's very important. It's not because the best team's doing that. The team that's doing that is the best team because they are doing that and then they're also the best team. You know what I'm saying? Like if IG wasn't good at playing flex laners, then they wouldn't be the best team at Worlds 2018. They wouldn't have won. You know, Fnatic would have won, or I don't know who would have won actually. Fnatic actually can play flex laners really well, so yeah, then they would have won. If IG couldn't play flex laners and then Fnatic could, then Fnatic would have won. Facts. And that wasn't just tournament meta. That was the best way to play the game for like 2 months after that. You got all the way to Kespa Cup. That's how everybody's still playing. So yeah, that's what a global meta would be. And then when you're in regions, if you're playing something other than that, okay, fine. But if there's a team in your region that can play that way and they can play it as good as IG, or like not as good as IG, but you know, like emulating that style, they might not have players as good as the Shy or players as good as Rookie, but they're emulating that style and they're playing it that way. And then they're not necessarily playing it because IG is doing it. They're playing it because those champions are strong. They're not playing it because IG's playing it. They're playing it because those champions are strong, but they're playing that style. Then they'll be the best team for sure because that's the way the game is balanced at that time. So that would identify a global meta. That would be what a global meta is. That's a global meta. So if you think there's not a global meta, there's a 100% a global meta. It doesn't mean that people are always doing it. You know? It doesn't mean that teams in Korea, the best team in Korea and the best team in China aren't playing the same way. That doesn't mean that they're playing the same way. But there's a best way to play the game, and then there's also like counter strategies to that best way to play the game, which is a counter meta to that. But the best way to play the game might not only just be one way. It might be a couple ways, you know. It might be 1-4 or 1-3-1 might be really good. You know, early game is really good right now, right? Or, you know, there's a lot of gold invested in the early game. So if you're not playing a little bit for early game, you're kind of trolling. So that would be part of the global meta. Everybody should be playing that way. And if you're not, then a team in your region should abuse that. You know, if your region isn't playing at all, they're just conceding all the turret plates. If all the teams are, then the one team that doesn't concede the turret plates is going to be the best team. They're at least going to win the early game, every game. And because that's the global meta. The global meta is to play for turret plates. Maybe not all the time, but you have to play for turret plates. You can't just concede them all. There's so much gold invested into the early game. That would be part of the global meta because because we're all playing the same game. So that's the way that works. And you're not just doing it because the best teams are doing it. The best teams are doing it because that's the best way to play the game, or the best way that they found to play the game, or the best way that fits their style of playing the game. But if there's a best way of playing the game at the time, the way the game's balanced, the team that is best suited for that playstyle is going to be the best team. So it's kind of how that works. So there is a global meta. There's also regional metas, but there are regional metas. But there's also a best way to play the game, and then there's a best way to play against that, and there's a best way to play against that way to play the game. And there's a best way to play that. But you can't just say like, oh, our region just plays for scaling. Okay, that's not the best way to play the game. So that's stupid. Okay, your region's bad then. That's what that means. If you just play for scaling and scaling's not good in the game right now, then your region's bad. That's what that means. So there is a global meta. Okay. That's all I'm going to say about that. Anyways, all right. That was it for this. That was it for this podcast. We did one. We finally made some content. I don't know if anybody's going to watch this, but I'm happy I made it. I'm happy I'm getting on the grind. I'm happy I'm doing stuff. So, anyways, thanks so much for watching. And that's going to be it for this video. I'm going to find the stop recording button, and I'm going to stop recording. That's what I'm going to do. I'm looking at my other monitor. I'm going to pull this on this screen, though. Whoa, look at that one. All right, yo, that's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks so much. I'll see you later. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. I found it. Bye-bye.